The Unit 1E lesson analyzes the impact of Teddy Roosevelt and his role in the transformation of the power of the presidency and the emergence of America as a more powerful player on the world stage. In the election of 1900, William McKinley was elected with his vice president as Teddy Roosevelt. On September 6th, a few months after inauguration, the president was shot and Roosevelt became president. Teddy Roosevelt, more than any other American of the time, he was a very loud personality. He had withdrawn from government service to start the Rough Riders during the Spanish-American War. His motto was to speak softly and carry a big stick. He believed that the presidency was a powerful bully pulpit and that America was the great civilizing power of the world. Even Woodrow Wilson described him as an irresistible man, and he was one of his biggest critics.
Generally, we don't think of our presidents as athletic individuals. We see Obama occasionally shoot some hoops in the gym, and that's good. But there's very few presidents you can think of as being athletic. T.R. was exceptionally athletic. His drive was such, he had so much energy, fueled on a lot of coffee. He would row from Oyster Bay across Long Island Sound to Connecticut. He even brought jiu-jitsu into the White House through his friendship with the Japanese foreign minister.
He still insisted on having his boxing matches as president, and in one boxing match, he was fighting this young Navy officer who was sparring with him and smacked him in the eye, blinded him in the eye. How irresponsible. You're president of the United States, for heaven's sakes. You need both good eyes. But no, it was more important for Roosevelt to get his exercise and to show that he could still mix it up with these young guys.
It's perceived as a little bit that Theodore Roosevelt is very energetic. Perhaps just a boy. He's a man who was influential in shaping the course of college football in the early 20th century. Because he saw football as sort of a way to reenact Civil War battles and create a test of manliness at a time when college football is, some Mississippi professional football is becoming violent to the point that people were getting seriously hurt or killed. Roosevelt stepped in and said, if you don't moderate this sort of athletic activity, it's going to go by the wayside.
Theodore Roosevelt believed you had to live the strenuous life, and he epitomized it. He says, I have no envy for a man who lives a life of ease.
A wonderful example of Roosevelt's ideas about the world is as soon as he becomes president, he, as he's elected to his first full term, he decides that he wants to show the world the power of the United States. So he takes what was known as the Great White Fleet, and these were gray Navy ships, obviously painted gray to sort of blend in to the horizon. He paints all of the ships white and sent the entire U.S. Navy, which was the largest in the world other than Great Britain's, on a 14-month tour of the world, claiming he knew that these ships were ready for a feast, a frolic, or a fight. Roosevelt believed that the United States' presence in the world and its perception needed to be powerful and needed to be large. After Roosevelt's term is over, he decides not to run for what was basically a third term. He had served as McKinley's vice president, so he took over for McKinley very early. He had served 2 terms, and up until that, ever since George Washington, up until that time, no president had ever served more than 2 terms. So his good friend, William Howard Taft, runs in his stead, and Roosevelt largely believed that Taft would uphold his legacy and that he would still have a tremendous influence on the presidency. However, Taft proved not to be the leader that Roosevelt was. In fact, he confessed that when people come in the room and asked for the president, that he turned to look for Roosevelt.
Roosevelt agonized over leaving the presidency. There was so much more he wanted to do. But, true to his word to the American people, he did not run for re-election in 1908. It was a decision that would haunt him for the rest of his life. After much soul-searching, Theodore Roosevelt thought it better to keep his word with the American public than to run for office again in 1908. Instead, Roosevelt decided to handpick his successor, someone he could rely on to carry out his agenda. With William Howard Taft, Roosevelt thought he had the perfect candidate. In truth, the two men were opposites in almost every way. Roosevelt was famous for his athleticism, while Taft was often ridiculed because of his weight. Happy to have been Roosevelt's right-hand man, Taft never had any real desire to be president. Taft fretted over making decisions and often procrastinated. He believed the president's job was merely to uphold the Constitution. Groundbreaking policies set by the freewheeling Roosevelt were slowly starting to reverse under Taft.
And TR was like a pot boiling over, watching Taft dismantle a lot of the programs and agendas that he had set. And he wanted revenge on Taft, and he got it.
The former best friends battled each other for the Republican nomination in 1912. It became so ugly that at one point, Taft broke down in tears. In turn, it was devastating to Roosevelt when the Republicans chose Taft as their candidate because they preferred his conservative politics. Even more shocking was Roosevelt's reaction. He joined the progressive Bull Moose Party. The result was a division in the Republican vote, opening the path for a clear victory for the Democratic challenger, Woodrow Wilson. Taft came in a distant third behind Roosevelt.
So after Taft has upset Teddy and he decides that he's going to split the vote, obviously Woodrow Wilson is going to win the presidency. The Progressive Party that Teddy Roosevelt starts will be the thing that eliminates his ability to ever run as a national Republican again, because people are frustrated that he ensured the election of Woodrow Wilson. How the term the Bull Moose Party began was because as Roosevelt was getting ready to give a speech, he had a metal spectacle case in his pocket and his very thick speech rolled up and folded over and an overcoat because it was cold, and he was shot. It went through the papers and through his glasses case, and he refused to go to the hospital and rather insisted to give his speech and then be treated for the bullet wound after his speech. Roosevelt's idea regarding presidential power was that he believed that the American people deserved whatever he thought was best. When there was a strike regarding coal, he did not care whether or not he had the power to nationalize, federalize the coal mines. He said, to hell with the Constitution, the people want coal. So obviously hoping to greatly expand the power of the presidency. Overall, Teddy Roosevelt transformed the role of America in the modern world to the role she takes today. He expanded federal power and expanded the view of what the president is allowed to do, what he is expected to do in order to further the country.